So hello, everybody. I'm here with Benedict Sheehan and Talia-Maria Sheehan. They are a couple that have been kind of in my circles for the last several years. They're good friends also with Andrew Gould that you've seen on this channel. Benedict is also participates in the Orthodox Art Journal, but mostly Benedict is a composer of sacred music. He is also a conductor, and he is the director of music at St. Tikhon's Seminary and Monastery. And his wife, Talia-Maria, is a vocalist, and she also teaches music as well. But mostly they really work as a team in all kinds of projects. And in this discussion, we're going to look at a particular project, which really I find very fascinating, and which is the Artefact Institute. This is Jonathan Pageau. Welcome to the Symbolic World. So Benedict and Talia-Maria, I will give you a chance to maybe introduce yourselves a little bit. I know that that you are very involved in the community there at St. Tikhon's, involved just in music, in Orthodoxy in general. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the things that you're working on, that you've accomplished, and we can move into the Artefact Institute as well.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to start?
Oh, no, you go.
I'll start. Okay. Yeah, and whenever I speak to anybody I haven't seen before, I like to explain that I do speak with a stutter. It's not your imagination. And I also explain to people that I do it deliberately to get attention. It's been a long-standing tactic of mine, and it works beautifully. So I'll continue to do it. Yeah. So as you said, I'm a composer and a conductor, and I started in church as a teenager. I just began to get interested in the music of the Orthodox Church. My parents are converts to Orthodoxy. When I was 9, you would never have guessed that I would become a church musician. I had no interest in sacred music at all. I really didn't have a lot of interest in church until I was probably 14, when my grandmother, who was not religious, sent me a recording of a Russian male choir singing Orthodox music, and that recording basically kind of changed the whole trajectory of my life. And from that point on, I just became interested in music and the music of the church, but also just music in general. And that's kind of set me on the path that I've remained on ever since. So I do all kinds of things. It's not easy to make a career in America as an Orthodox church musician.
That's the understatement of the
I would say so.
Yeah. So I've done all kinds of things. But for the last 10 years, I've been at St. Tikhon's and been really trying to create a job. And so 10 years later, it's kind of the only job of its kind in the country. And I'm still trying to expand it, but we now have a music staff. We've started a professional ensemble under the auspices of the monastery called the St. Tikhon Choir, which is the first pro choir under the auspices of an Orthodox institution that's ever been created here in America. And we've made some recordings. We just recorded, or just in 2019, we recorded My Divine Liturgy, which was a new piece that was commissioned by the Artefact Institute. And that'll be out this coming fall. I've started to work with a group on the West Coast called Capella Romana. Mm-hmm. I've been out there a number of times to conduct them, and they're going to be performing my new liturgy in November with me conducting. at least that's still the plan. We'll see if there's still such a thing as live arts come fall, but let's pray that it continues. I don't know. I recently finally broke through into the world of choral publishing and got published by Oxford this year, and they recorded a piece of mine, and hopefully there's more to come on that front too. So I can't even keep track of it all, but that's okay. One day at a time.
That's a good problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things I forgot to mention is that both of you have 7 daughters, which is amazing.
Yeah, right.
We do.
So it's genuinely one day at a time.
We have, well, it was diapers to dating. So now it's college to preschool. So like we're edging the monolith forward.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, we're not edging it forward, let's be honest. It goes on its own.
It does take it on its own. Just, yeah.
So no tenors, unfortunately. Well, one of our daughters has to sing tenor.
She's great at it too. Yeah. Not me. I don't do that.
Well, I've seen some of the things you've been putting on social media, some of the family choir stuff. It's really touching to see. It's very beautiful, you know, and you're doing different styles as well, different traditions, and it's very beautiful and touch. For those of us, like for myself, who's not very musical, you know, I like music. I'm just not very musical. I have that dream and I have this vision of, you know, the family singing together. It's very beautiful.
Yes.
You're really not alone.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful desire. I mean, that's one of the things that we found in our work, which is, you know, you can work in the sort of like, you know, the technically kind of high, you know, high proficiency level of in an art. And that's one kind of way to be. And then you can work with beginners, and that's another kind of way to be. And what we found in our being here at St. Sheehans is that partly because of what the vision of the abbot, Father Sergius, the abbot of the monastery is, and then the mission of the seminary too. You know, they're kind of two sides, two different.
They're symbiotic.
Yeah, exactly. They're separate, but equal. But there's such a strong value for liturgy here, that partly just because it gets done every day, which is almost incomprehensible. It's just such a huge job. It's an insanely huge job. So all the resources that get put into this high frequency reiteration of liturgy mean that problems they come up more frequently, and they have to be addressed and solved more quickly. So it's, I like to use the metaphor that this is kind of the fruit flies of the liturgical world. So we see the evolution of the species, as it were, at a faster rate here.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to
and you know, so problems that a community that only serves once a week would literally take them 7 times longer to come up with the kinds of problems that come up here.
Right.
So, you know, my end of this is that I'm a vocalist and a music teacher. And so we kind of tag team really nicely, because I help prepare the individual musicians to be able to work with him. And then as he works with them, then he brings them to higher and higher levels. So we kind of have this cyclical process.
Then they have to go back to you.
Yeah, and get a little bit better.
And next step, right? Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see how that combination of work, you know, just me working with the singers in some abstracted way of trying to get them to sing better or be better, have better musicianship skills, wouldn't have an application. And just him working with them on repertoire and trying to get the services done, it was kind of, you'd probably hit a plateau. And I think a lot of a lot of people who are trying to make beauty in the arts, they only have one or another of those things and have to search for the other one on their own. And we just, I guess, providentially just came like ready bundled. So Father Sergius is definitely responsible for that support. I mean, it takes somebody with a vision to support artists in a way that he supports us, and the seminary too. So we're really lucky in that.
Yeah, respect. I mean, all great, not maybe not all, but a lot of great artistic work in of the past has depended really on patronage and on and to a certain extent that we get to benefit from that. Like we're provided a context. We have to work for our daily bread, obviously, but there's a sense, and I think that's one of the things that's really remarkable about the leadership here at Sheehans is there's a sense that the work we're trying to do is valuable, that we're given a context in which to basically figure it out and to try to solve problems on our own, and to offer what we can, to offer new ideas, to offer new creative work in that context. And I mean, we're really, as the years go by, we really believe in this idea of context, that you can't just produce art or produce, do anything creative in a kind of vacuum or just for yourself. I mean, there's a certain element that you do it for yourself because that's what you need to do. So if you're alone and you're an artist, that's what you do because you need to make art to survive. But it's still important. Like, we really believe that art it's about communicating with the other, and so you do the art because you need to, but how much better is it if there's a context in which you can communicate, and a context where what you communicate is both valued and understood.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I've, let's say there's this aspect of communication, but one of the aspects that I've been trying to emphasize a lot is the idea of participation, where we have a sense in our culture that art is it's something that you look at or something that you listen to, that it really is a passive act. Whereas what I'm seeing with what you're doing, in terms of choir music, in terms of also this Artefact Institute that we'll talk about, is trying to create a laboratory that is not just a laboratory for artists who are making things, but the community which is also going to be receiving the fruits of this art, right? So it's this symbiotic relationship between what's not really a public and the kind of, modern way of understanding public, but is really those who are benefiting, who are participating, and who are kind of collaborating with you to create this symbiotic art, that's in the community, like you said, that's being communicated through people, but also with them as well.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. The thing about singing and singing together is that it's a really old idea. People have been doing this for a very long time, like since the beginning of humanity. like some of the oldest prehistoric artifacts, there's the word,
see what we did there?
See what we did there, yeah. are actually musical instruments. There's a 41,000-year-old bone flute. The name of it escapes me, but it will come back at some point. But it's actually one of the oldest artifacts that exists, and it's a flute. Like, so if we have that, it's not like some guy just had this idea, I'm going to make a bone into a flute. I mean, it's got ways to actually change the pitch. So if we've got that, it means that it was an older idea than that by far. I mean, it's a thing that had to be generated over time, over a long period of time. You know, but if we've got, you know, but the thing about singing is that, of course, to make music with your voice, or to make musical sounds, or make rhythmic sounds, is a thing that's a lot more intuitive than it would be to carve an animal bone into a flute. So yeah, that can't be preserved.
The only preservation is in our biology. So if everybody seems to love this so much, if like in contexts where there's no explicit instruction to sing, we sing like at, I don't know, like at soccer games, you know, or when people are drinking, or when people are fighting, like what is it about singing that makes it so that seems to be a reasonable thing to do in such an intensely, you know, like not terribly celebratory context, maybe necessarily, but somehow deeply, deeply human.
So so we really believe that it's something that's really, really deeply rooted in mankind, and it's, in that sense, it's a part of what it means to be a person. Yeah. You know, that's what people do. People sing. So to speak about your idea of art that's participatory, there's no more kind of fundamental participatory art than when we sing together.
And where is the song? I mean, the song doesn't exist on the sheet of music. Right. You know, it doesn't exist even in the recording. It only exists either in the experience of hearing the song or in the act of actually producing the song. Yeah. So in and of itself, it's already assumed that there's two people there, you know?
Yeah.
which is super interesting.
I think one of the things that really define, I mean, this is, to my understanding, this is my own speculation, is that one of the reasons why music is what defines human beings, one of the aspects which define us, is because it does have to do with patterns. It has to do with our capacity to see, but also engage in patterns. And so the idea of music, it's really is a pure pattern. It's one of the purest forms of patterns that you can find, you know. It's almost mathematical in its purity. But then, as you said, singing together, it brings the pattern not only as this kind of mathematical or you know, participation in opposites and in variation and all of this, but it's also doing it in a way that's creating a social pattern at the same time, right? So it's
absolutely
connecting the two together. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, it's because it's a pattern, but art, like visual arts, are patterns kind of in space. What's so interesting about music is that it's a pattern in time. It turns time into a pattern. And that way, the liturgical year, the cycle of feasts and fasts, the rhythm of the days of the week, you know, all of that is, in some sense, it's a musical phenomenon. It's turning time into something rhythmic, into something ordered, something patterned, and therefore it's both infinitely various, but also familiar, and it kind of roots itself in the memory and in the experience. So in that way, I mean, it's music. My dad used to say that my dad was not a musician. My dad was a literary kind of figure, but my dad used to point out that the only art that we know from scripture that exists in the age to come is music, is singing, like, because we know the angels sing and the song at the end of time, and you know, all the images in Revelation. We don't know that there's going to be iconography. We don't know that there's going to be architect.
There's that city. There is that whole city. You know.
Well, there is that. It's true. It's an architectural. Fine. I don't mean to
give me that. Thank you.
I don't mean to dismiss that. But yeah.
Scrapping.
Yes. Well, it's But I do think that there's something like this idea of turning time into a pattern. Yeah, is really important.
No, I think you're right, and I think it's interesting because when you read the ancients and they talk about things like the music of the spheres, or they talk about music itself, and you see this the idea that music was part of the, you know, the core curriculum of the ancients. There really is a sense that music is bigger than just even what we understand as music today. It really is this idea of the world as being patterned, a time being patterned, as the whole idea of participating in the patterns, you know, the word music was used to manifest that, you know, and so, but it is in a way the purest form because it is spiritual, right? It's non-physical. It's not like architecture or like like images or like objects, making a chair.
Yeah.
It is a pure pattern. It's a pure pattern that you can pick up, you know, like you were saying, where is the song? If I can sing a song in the morning and then I sing the same song at night, you know, it's like it's the same song, but I'm resonating it, but the song exists really in this spiritual pattern. And so it is a way for us to connect to the patterns of the world and to understand also what it is that we mean when we talk about spiritual things, you know, and to your point, Benedict, the idea that we see the angels singing, that we have this image of the heavenly choir, is also to help us understand that there is a relationship even with principality, with angels, and with this idea of singing, that they are manifesting the pattern back up to God. They're kind of, you know, they're glorifying God by using these patterns, and they're also manifesting it to us as we kind of hear this glorious singing of that is going up to God.
That's beautiful.
One of the most spectacular things that I enjoy intensely is the although I don't ever feel really entirely capable of dealing with it, is the closeness of the soul in the singer. And I think I tell our students that, you know, there's no mistake that the church says that we are to sing in our worship. That is not accidental. It's not because we didn't have the resources to have instruments or something like that. That's silly. So the singing, the process,
and it's not because it's not because instruments are evil.
Yeah, good point.
That's
all the ortho bros watching this.
So the experience of trying to, you know, expressing the ideal of a certain kind of sound in singing, it's entirely individualized. The ideal of a singer's voice is totally peculiar to that individual, because what makes up that voice is totally, you know, the unique shapes and sizes of the various pieces of tissue and, you know, lung capacity and all that kind of thing.
And what's going on in their mind.
So let alone their psychology. So just the act of trying to find the ideal voice for every individual is a personal journey. And when you then try and actually use those tools to their most efficient and most effective and most beautiful end, what you invariably come up against are the, you know, basically your wounds. And so I joke that I'm so sorry, all my students, but your voice lesson is a therapy session. And it's even worse than therapy, because in therapy, you can be like, yeah, the next time I come up against this difficulty, I am going to behave this way. That's how I want to be. That's the ideal I'm going to shoot for. Well, in a voice lesson, there is no the next time. It's right that second. And if you don't do it, you'll be able to tell that you didn't do it, and you will be disappointed, and you will have to try the immediate second afterwards to do it again. So it's like the most real-time self, like, you know, soulcraft that I have found in frankly any of my teaching. And then when you get a bunch of people trying to do that, and that frankly, that process sounds a heck of a lot like repentance, like active repentance. You get a bunch of people, individuals trying to do that, who come together to then try and do that at the same time towards the same end. That's why singing it together with people is transcendent. That's exceptional. And so, you know, part of our work here has been to say, and to be completely honest, a lot of people who feel drawn to the church don't necessarily feel that way because they feel like they're good. You know, I'm fine. I'm comfortable with who I am. This is great. They want more for themselves, and sometimes that wanting more is a desire to share with other people, and then you get a pastoral impulse. Well, a lot of those folks don't tend to have let's just be blunt, the requisite ego to be able to actually use their bodies confidently. And that's why kind of, the performer is almost a psychological type. You have to have a huge amount of actual psychological and physical confidence to be able to make a good sound as a singer. And so the process of trying to get people who are already somewhat inclined towards self-criticism, or somewhat inclined towards putting themselves definitely second in, in order to care for others,
or who feel like what they're being told by the church is they have to,
that they're bad,
or they have basically like that, the idea that for us to repent and have humility, it means that we have to tell ourselves that we're bad. That there's a way. I just add that as a aside. Yeah.
This is like, these are actual impediments to doing the job that we're supposed to do. And it's stuff like this that you wind up coming up against when you have to sing together every day for hours a day, and you have to sing better. So what we found in our work here, and I think it's possible that educational institutions, and even educational institutions that are founded in a church community, of which there ought to be more, they could come up against these issues and try and figure out how to solve them, just as we have. But we have this advantage of the frequency. So
and the other thing too is, like, when you sing, like, you can't pretend that you're all together. There's no, there's a certain there's a certain way in which you do have to pretend when you sing, because even if you don't feel like the thing that you're singing about, you still have to act like you do. But in terms of the act of actually singing well, there's no way to pretend that you sing well when you don't. So it's like it.
We all know this.
But like, we have this thing, like, in the church, I think, where we're like where we can, to a certain extent, we can pretend to be really spiritual, and we can do all kinds of other things that aren't really spiritual at all, but we think that they are. They look like they are, and so we can get by, and like, we can all be really religious and devout. But then when we try to sing, it's like, nope, it's not happening.
No pretending there.
Yeah, right. So that's a great thing too. It's like, if we all worked a little bit more to get together on trying to sing well, then we might find that we can solve some of our other problems too.
Interesting.
So we kind of got Artefact from this process of continually having people come to us and say, please help me. Please help me.
So
and
maybe tell us what Artefact is, right? Give us a sense of what it is, because I know what it is, but I want people to get a sense of what it is, because it's a very fascinating mission. It's one which just makes so much sense when I saw it. So please tell us what it is, and then we can you put in there the story a little bit of how it came about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So the Artefact Institute is a collective. What we're calling it is a collective of culture creators. In very basic terms, it's a company that we've founded in the past 6 months. No, something like that.
Well, what's time?
Yeah, I don't even know when it is anymore.
Especially now, who knows what date it is?
Oh gosh, it's every day is this. It's the same. We talked about the rhythmic ordering of time, but like, there is no rhythmic ordering of time anymore.
Everybody.
Oh man.
Yeah. So we kind of started with the idea, and this evolved out of our discussions with our friend and colleague Nick Kotar, and also to some extent, but later on with Bishop Alexis, who is he lives at St. Tigans. He's a newly elected bishop in the OSCA, to kind of figure out a way to solve what we think of as the problem. Let's say the problem of context. We're religious, yes. But we all kind of understand that nobody can be religious all the time, or or there has to be, there's an ebb and flow to life. There's an ebb and flow to the week. There's an ebb and flow to your lifetime. And we go to church, but it's like, what do you do with the rest of your time? So does it, should the rest of my week start to look like church? Is that the idea? It's like, well, people have tried that. We've tried that. It's not really the answer, and I don't think it's sustainable for most people, or maybe for anybody.
Interestingly, that's not what the life of the monastics here necessarily.
No, I don't think that's
like.
what even a life in a monastery. Maybe some people can sustain that, but so it's like, well, what do you do with the rest of your time? And we're also starting with this question of like, we have a church, but where is the church? What's around it? What's the context of the church? And so one of the things we came to realize is that a church exists in a culture. It's not just a thing that stands on its own. The church is in a town. The town is in a region. The region is in a country. But it's like, so what is it that sustains the life of the church? Well, it's a culture. And in the past, that the whole idea of culture kind of evolved, and a lot of what we think of as culture is just the way people have grown and adapted and evolved to live together, to work together, to eat together, in great part just so they don't die.
It was not some lofty ideal. It
wasn't
necessity.
Right. So we form a town, we form a tribe, we form a village, so we can eat, so we can be safe, so we can raise our children in our tribe, our species. I don't think any of us really tend to think like that, but so that it can continue. We now in our time have this really interesting
problem.
Problem. Yeah, and again, it's all precarious to a certain extent, but we've managed to solve a lot of the kind of practical problems of humanity, and we are continuing to solve them. I mean, that's what we're doing right now. I mean, infectious disease was just a part of life for all of for all of time. And the idea that it would just wipe out a quarter or a third or half the population was just understood, like that could occur. What's really interesting is that we have a lot of tools and a lot of systems and mechanisms to actually, like, for us to think like that's not the norm, that's not what is going to occur, or at least we're trying to make it be that. And I think to a great extent we're being able to succeed at that. But what's interesting is that's a new thing. Like, humanity's never really pulled this off before. And so I use that as an example of the ways in which, like, most of us now, most of humanity, most of the time has enough to eat. Most of us have a place to live. Most of us have, in a sense, we've managed to create a remarkably secure, stable society all over the world. And we're, it's still a work in progress, obviously, but compared to basically every other time, it's pretty miraculous. So we in a sense, like, we don't have to have a village or a tribe in order to survive from day to day. That's a remarkable thing. But that's introduced a new problem, which is that we now, because so many of our needs are provided for, we don't know what we're doing with our lives. We don't know where we belong. We don't know, we don't have to connect with other people in order to eat, in order to not be destroyed by a band of marauders. So, but yet we don't have to connect with people. So we don't connect with people. We don't do things with other people. We don't eat together. We don't sing together. We don't celebrate together. We don't really work together. And right now, in the midst of quarantine, that's more true than it ever has been.
Yeah.
But we find that as a result of that, we're like really missing some key things. We're kind of dying inside in some way. And so what we think of is that in the past, the phenomenon of culture kind of created itself out of necessity. But now we actually have to create culture still out of necessity, but a different kind. We need to do it in order to know who we are, in order to know where we belong, in order to know what the purpose of our life is, in order to, to connect with others, for our souls to survive. So that's kind of the big picture idea of like, well, so if we're going to create these things, if we're going to like deliberately create culture rather than it just being able to occur on its own, how would that be done?
Well, to a certain extent, it's an issue of scale too, right? So what we also have in this time of rather extraordinary, practical resources is insanely high quality entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean that like just, really, really produced stuff is amazing. I mean that the actual technical level of your average piano student is considerably higher, even just in this past, 40, 50 years than it previously was. And, recordings we have of really, exceptional ensembles from the early 20th century. They're kind of like, okay, it's powerful, it's emotive, it's really beautiful in that way, but technically it's like a little lacking.
Yeah, I mean, I think musicians are better now on the average than they were in the past.
So, but the funny thing is that we have this sense of all of this culture creating being the responsibility of a specialized class. And that being the responsibility of a specialized class has given us this exceptional entertainment, but we didn't realize what we were trading for that sort of exceptional resource. We didn't realize that it was actually sort of psychologically and spiritually necessary for us to be working at this ourselves, not in order to kind of like take down the ideal, but we all were supposed to be working towards this ideal.
It's not to be on America's Got Talent.
No, it's not. But God bless them. I mean,
but it's so we can know how to spend our time together.
But it's shocking because in Quebec, we had a very traditional culture not very long ago, and my grandparents, in their generation, they would still take the table out of the living room and get the local fiddle guy to come in and call a dance, and it was just a normal part of life, that you would do during the holidays, you would do for special occasions, and that is gone, right? So now you get a DJ to come and play recorded music. You dance, but you don't dance together. Everybody dances individually. Mm-hmm. So all the manifestations of culture are showing us the problem that you talked about, which is in our moment of self-sufficiency, also in our moment of our desire to move away from meaning and move towards just this kind of material wealth. We've lost something. We've lost this togetherness.
Yeah. So in that circumstance, if you were going to admitting that is an ideal that you like it pulls at your heart somehow, if you were going to try and reproduce that what is the first question that would come to you?
If I was going to try to reproduce that, I would be completely lost in every manner. Like I would be lost in exactly like how to do it. Exactly. How can I do that? And I mean, like, I don't just mean technically, I mean like how to do it in terms of even getting people to want it. Like even that is already the first beginning. And then getting myself to want it deeply. I can want it intellectually, but to put the effort in to like do it. Yeah. Whoa, that's a whole other world. So to me, it's like, it feels like that world is completely lost.
So the easiest way to navigate those treacherous waters is with a guide.
There you go.
And that is what our collective is. Because we're pedagogues. So not only are we working in the specialized sort of like, we work in the professional world, and that really we could devote all our time and energy to that and we would still be struggling. And there's no question about that. There's no end to how good you can get. But then it's kind of like, you know, which is not to say I think we're prophets, but there's a certain job that a prophet has in a community. It's like, go have some revelation, go have some exalted experience, and then you better go back to your community and be able to communicate that experience.
Right.
Because how the heck else is everybody going to know what they're supposed to be working towards? And you need to demonstrate it. You need to model it. You need to explain it with language. And so we're trying to assemble, and to a certain extent, we have to do task analysis on ourselves. We have to say, well, how do we do that? And then we're trying to assemble the technique that's required.
And the team.
The team to communicate that technique.
Right, yeah.
To be able to guide people in this process of being able to just have one experience, one experience of this stuff you're lacking. And you don't have to change your life, just do it once. And then maybe do it again.
Right.
And so what we've worked towards creating it's kind of a couple tiers of activity. One, there's the educational tier where we really assemble, we kind of break down what is necessary for taking the first steps in any of these, we call them elements. And then being able to impart that. Now, whether that's one-on-one instruction, or creating a social context in which the technique can have life. And, you know, what you said about how to get yourself to want to do it and how to get other people to want to do it. We all know the awkwardness of a party where you're really not sure why you're there. So it's like, well, I guess let's just drink because that will numb the question of what we're even doing.
Right. Yeah.
So that's probably why there's a lot of, you know,
alcohol. Yeah, it's like we think like people drink too much at a party, which, I mean, a good party, that can be fun too. But, you know, people drink too much at parties because they're partying too much. But actually we contend that they do it because they're not partying enough, because they're using alcohol to do all kinds of other things that actually like singing together or listening to a story or doing a contra dance or playing an instrument or playing game,
or even sitting on the edge of the party in a room that's well decorated and you know carefully
has a fire, and you know, I mean, like so we're using like a single thing to do the job of all those other things. So our interest is okay. Well, we should talk about Louisville.
Yeah. So the first big event that we hosted was in Louisville, and it was in January, and it was over the feast of Candlemas, of the entry of the Lord into the temple, and we
meeting board. Right?
Meaning, yeah.
I never can keep that straight either.
Go back to seminary.
Yeah.
Sorry. One of the really extraordinary insights that our friend Bishop Alexis brought to the process of coming up with this was his experience of being on Mount Athos, and he was a monk on the Holy Mountain for a little over a decade, and he explained, you know, how do you get people who come from different cultures, different countries, speak different languages, to suddenly live in an immersive way together and have that kind of cohesion that you really need in order to survive that environment. And he said there were three aspects of life there, and that was the common worship, and that was what everything was founded on. And then out of that flowed the common work. And then from that, and not the least of the three, was the common feast. And so we took that formula, and Bishop Alexis said his experience was that was present at every level of his life, his monastic life. And we took that formula and we thought, okay, could we do this over a limited period of time in a pedagogical way, but also a way that feels complete in a remote location? And so partly because of the extraordinary sort of resources of that community, St. Michael the Archangel, Antiochian Church in Louisville, and partly because of the assembly of people, instructors and students that came together there, the almost 200 people that were part of the weekend's program.
The first.
Really, it surprised almost all of us with both its intensity and its efficacy, really. So the good news is that, yeah, we can practice this. We can get better at this, which is really encouraging, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we do a number of things under the Artefact brand. We, as a team, go and do church music workshops in various parishes. We've also started to publish. We created a song book of 12 essential folk songs that we think are good for kind of a home gathering, for a party, or songs you can sing with your friends or your kids. And we're going to do more with that. We're probably going to make a recording to promote that, I think, because people like to learn from recordings. And
yeah, that's really, for those of us who can't read music, when I saw that you had put up a recording, I'm like, okay, I feel like I can actually engage with this now, because when first I saw the prints, I was like, okay, this is not for me, my friend.
Well, that's the thing about a song. I mean,
the song's not on the score.
The song is not the notes in the page. That's an entry point into the song, but there's a lot of other ways to go in, and by far the more common way to learn a song for all of human history was by ear. So we're going to help. We're going to try work on that. We kind of do consulting work where we go into a community, we speak with them, we work with them, and we talk about some things they can do, and we'll even put on some kind of an event or help to coach them in that. But we also want there to be some really some magnet events where a lot of people can come from all over, and that's what we started in Louisville, and the plan is to do it again in 2021, where we can bring a lot of people together. And at that event, you should talk about the kind of the rhythm of the day. I think that's a good way to.
That common worship, common work, common feast thing, that can happen over on multiple scales. So we structured it so that every day began with worship, and we sang in small chunks the Karthus Glory to God for all things, which is kind of an exceptional piece, especially for
really important, I think,
kind of what's going on right now. And remarkable that it was composed by someone who was in
a prison camp.
It really is it's very powerful for the modern times.
It's a masterpiece, I think.
Totally.
Yeah, and I actually believe it's in a 3-act structure that mirrors the cathartic journey of the hero. I actually contend that the Karthus is a monomyth.
Write it up, Benedict. Send it to me. I'll publish it on our symbolic blog there.
So anyway.
All right, so tell us. Go ahead.
We started with that in the morning, and part of the community is what's remarkable about it, to a certain extent, also is architecture. So they have some really amazing spaces that do what spaces are supposed to do. They tell you what you are supposed to do in them,
who you are and where you belong, and who God is and who your neighbor is. Like
I've heard you say that before, Jonathan, that it's like this the most significant art in a sort of sleeper way, because we don't know what to do if we're in a space that's telling us to do one thing, but we think we're supposed to do a different thing. So that community
so much
had,
to say.
It's just like, we've got a couple more hours now.
I know.
So we were in a beautiful space that really showed us that what we were supposed to do was, be still and pray. And that's how we started our day. And then the rest of the work hours.
Then we went to eat, we went to breakfast, and then we did a group singing. All right. So we did the morning singing.
And that it was awesome. Partly because what our goal, if I say so myself.
Well, I've heard only good things about that event. I've heard just amazing people just really excited about it. And myself feeling very lonely and sad that I didn't go. You invited me, but I just had something else. I don't remember what it was.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
We have the next one.
We, for our own, like, you know, sense of peace and sanity, we need to do these things too. So don't worry.
Yeah.
No, but the morning sing was interesting because one of the weird things is that if you want to have a celebration where some corporate activity happens, that celebration can't be a new thing.
Right,
there has to be some memory that celebration is founded on. That's the kind of like, oh, we do this. So we had to teach the people there that these were songs they sang. So that when it came time for the party, they could be like, oh, we should sing our songs. But it took several days of imparting that and holding their hands through that process for them to then think, okay, these are our songs. And then the singing of them at the party, which was the final kind of, you know, capstone experience, not remotely the high point. It was just another of the many high points, kind of. It felt natural, and that was kind of an interesting process, pedagogical process for us, because just like you said, you wouldn't know how to do a thing that you didn't do. If you don't do a thing, then how do you start doing a thing? And that's a barrier that I think so many people come up against when they want to make their lives more beautiful. But that analogous memory thing, like, oh, it's got to be like another thing I've done.
My grandparents knew how to do this, but I don't know how to do. And none of my friends do, and none of my family does. So what do we do? So in a sense, it has to be taught again, or taught anew. I don't know about again. It has to be taught anew. We have to have things for us and for our time.
And it seems like the way you're doing it, in the sense that you're building up and you're actually creating the experience of learning and then rejoicing in the things you've learned. It seems like it's a nice little microcosm of how it can work on a bigger scale, you know, because like you said, because it's lost, it's harder for us to access the bigger scale ones. So building these smaller scale ones, you know, can let's say layer up and hopefully create bigger ones. I think it's a great
100%.
process.
100%. It was super exciting to see it work so well. It worked better than we actually thought it was going to work.
So then after the morning sing, we would all disperse to the various disciplines that we were working in. So there was training for conductors. There was a program for singers. There was a program for writers and storytellers, and that's about as far as we were able to go with this first one. But we'd like to do more. And then we would come back to get together at some point in the day to actually have the choir rehearsals, and we were preparing for a concert, and then for a service on Sunday morning for the Feast of the Meeting of the Lord. And the concert was actually a narrative program where Nick Kotar, he worked together with the other writers in the workshop to prepare a narrative of the life of Saint Simeon, more or less made up, but based on some of the things we have from older documents, and then we interspersed it with music sung by choir, which was made up of a bunch of different people. The big choir was actually about 70 people, and then there was a smaller chamber group, which was about 30, and then there were 13 pros who were kind of the core. And then each of them sang a different thing, and the whole thing had a narrative and dramatic arc.
Come on, you're talking to Jonathan Pageau. What Deacon Nicholas noticed was that there was symbolic.
Totally forgot.
There was symbolic structure of the hero's journey in the sequence of Vespers.
Okay.
And so the actual service of Vespers could be melded with the story that he wrote about Saint Simeon, and have the sequence of hymnography in it actually follow the arc of his life. And that was an exceptional experience, because
really cool.
our feeling was like, okay, yeah, we're going to do a thing. It's Vespers. There's all these words, but we wanted to try and reawaken.
Re-enchant.
Kind of, that word that's a fun word right now. To re-enchant Vespers, and we had to find the symbolic language in the service in order to really do that and bring it into a narrative. And it was really powerful. It was really amazing.
It began with a procession where people were holding candles and singing, and there was incense dance, and the whole church was dark. And then we processed up to the front, and we lit everybody's candles, and the narrator begins, and then all the lights come on when the choir began to sing Rachmaninoff, and it was pretty awesome. I mean, it's really epic. So we did that,
say so
and then on the next day we had the liturgy, and the whole choir sang for the liturgy, and the student conductors who they also helped to conduct in the liturgy, and then at the end of it all, we had the big feast, and we worked all through the day to prepare the space to go and forage for greenery. We brought in, we were ironing the tablecloths and putting out the candles and setting the plates.
All under the expert instruction of our conviviality instructor, Amanda Jacobs, who is a designer, interior decorator and designer, and who, like that task analysis thing, well, you know, these fancy things, this china I have in my cabinet, that's not for me to use. I wouldn't even know how to use it.
Yeah.
So part of her job, and everybody participated in this, partly because what we're trying to tell people is that this is for you.
Yeah, I know, this is amazing. I love your approach. It's such a great idea to have people prepare the feast at themselves, you know, and like you said, iron the tablecloths, put out the decorate the tables, do all that, so that it feels like this is our feast. This is not something we could go into a hotel lobby, like a hotel greeting room, and we just sit at the table and that's it. It's like, this is our thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, and so you have to have all three elements. You have to have the common worship, so we all can get together and in some way express what is our ideal, what do we believe in, or what are we aiming at, and then we all work together, and we all sweat, and so we do the work, and
we do the bonds, work under the guidance of experts, though, because there's nothing so disappointing as work that feels like futility, because you don't know what you're doing, and you know it doesn't work.
Exactly.
It has to be the right work, but also the bonds that you create when you work to get together are very strong. People. When we work together, we meet people in a much deeper way than if we're just having a chat, or so we work together. Somebody has to hold the ladder while the other person puts up the candles that we hung from the ceiling, and you get your hands dirty, and like there's a lot of bonds that you form as a community when you do tasks to get together in a really really specific and clear way. And then we do all that, and then we all go back, and we get and we put our nice party clothes on, and we come back together, and the room is lit with candles, and there's a band playing, and there's champagne, and everybody's just like, the kind of the reaction when people walked into the room was just the kind of gasp of like, this is so beautiful. And it's like, but
they made it.
But I made
it's
this.
our beautiful thing.
So it's like I didn't realize that I deserved to be treated like this, or to treat myself like this. That's a powerful thing. And then so we all sit down, do we? So we pray. People gave toasts. People told stories. People read poems. We sang songs. We actually did country dancing. They did Arabic folk dancing. It was pretty spectacular. And so we were there for like 4 hours, and you just had a sense of like you didn't want you didn't know how much time had passed. You didn't want the party to end.
Time passed differently.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have had that transcendent value if we hadn't all been working towards an ideal that we shared, that we articulated together, and that we all agreed upon sort of implicitly and then shared. And that's the context that a church comes from. I mean, that's what creates a church. And so we see left over in society, we see the churches with the foundations underneath them eroding out from them. So what we're trying to say to people is that, okay, so maybe you don't live in a village anymore, but those things that people did that were expressions of how their interaction on a sort of micro level were important, we can still do that. We have to modify our technique, and we have to have conversations with experts and with artists and with culture creators and with, you know, thinkers about how we modify it, because each new age, the technique changes because the tools change and the context change. But there are these sort of fundamental needs that we need to address, and that working together, we'll come up with a way more, you know, authentic expression than if just we let some elite class do this for us. What do they know about us? How can they actually meet our peculiar needs? You know, Hollywood can't produce all the stories. We have to tell some of our own stories.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like I always say, the stories that Hollywood, they tell us the stories. They're not our stories. We don't participate in them. We don't feel like
Right.
that they connect to us in the way that my story, you know, or hearing the story of a friend, you know, all of these stories are stories that you engage with, that you can pray for the other person, that you have this real interaction. It's a real interlocking of stories, you know. And there's nothing wrong with the entertainment versions or the you know.
No,
the
I love the
professional
stories I get
They're
told on
great.
Netflix. I mean,
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
great. Yeah.
But we need to not replace one with the other.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Agreed. Because like you need, like, it's like in this whole debate now about like how do we do, because a lot of us couldn't go to church for Easter, and you know we had the option to sit and watch a live stream of church, but in my mind it's like church, you know, like even being in church, it's already in some sense it's a virtual reality, because the whole like all the liturgical stuff we do is all these encoded symbols and these stylized representations of things, which are all in a sense to create this idea of the kingdom of God, you know. And so that's already, in my mind, it's already VR. You know, and when it's really well done, it's really powerful. When it's not well done, it's not as great. But it's like I couldn't wrap my mind around then watching a virtual version of that. It was too far removed to me from reality, and so we were our idea was to actually to create an order that revolved around a meal and prayers at the meal. Around, we kind of made a ritual of putting on the clothes that you would have for Easter. We ritualized decorating the table, and the bringing out of the food, and certain prayers to go with certain parts of the meal, and then you know, to make, basically that's what we can do on our own. We can make the Easter meal a bigger and more meaningful experience. And so that's what we did. We actually created an order of that together with Bishop Alexis and one of the priest monks at St. Tikhon's. And when we put, and then we made that available to people everywhere, and it actually got approved by the synod of the OCA. The bishops actually, they actually,
We were totally shook.
It's amazing.
Yeah, we were really,
That's amazing.
yeah.
Like,
And
agree?
and they got used in Australia and in South Africa and in Germany and in the UK and all over Canada. So there's this sense of like, we can, because our idea was like, let's see like what would worship at Easter look like if it grew out of our own experience at home. Yeah. So that's what was it really, I think it worked. So we did that because I feel like it's really important that we not just do church because that's what we do. And it's like church, the worship of the church is a wonderful and beautiful thing, but it didn't just come from nowhere. It didn't just get dropped out of the sky, even if some people believe that. It really didn't. You know, it evolves out of culture. It evolves out of people, you know, being together, and having relationships, and then trying to find God and to know God and to love God. that's where worship evolves from, you know. But if we don't take part in that, if we don't have a sense of that evolution, if we don't have a sense of where it fits into the rest of our lives, I really worry it becomes just something that's totally imaginary, something that's totally artificial,
or at least just totally detached from
totally
what we consider the
yeah.
rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So our sense is to like, we have to kind of reconnect those things.
Well, I think I'm really excited to see where you're going with this. All the things I've seen have been beautiful. I think that that you've thought out the method, and also to kind of take people by the hand and just kind of guide them through. And I think it's really a testimony to your own family, to your own community, that you have the strength at this time and kind of the resources to bring this together. And so I want to encourage everybody to go. I'll be posting the links in the description. Artefact. You'll see also the downloads that they have and the different resources that they're putting together. Hopefully, when all of this chaos of virus goes away, there'll also be events, and I will definitely be going at the next event because I'm really excited by this project.
Well,
good news.
Well, it's, I mean, it needs you. We need you.
Well, thank you, because I feel like I need exactly what you're doing. So it's also really exciting for me to see, because we kind of started having small collaborations through Orthodox Art Journal, and different people work on different things, and it's just exciting to see us, like with Nicholas Kotar and yourselves and myself and Andrew and all these different people, that we're on the same track. We all have our different little version of it. We all have our different vision, but we kind of understand the problem in similar ways. And so it's
right.
great to feel like even if we're not together physically, that we're a team in a certain way, that we're kind of working in the same direction. So that's exciting.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, I think at least I'm optimistic that that's a sign that it's something from God, that we're all being coordinated, in some ways, like in ways that we can't see or even understand, but it's like, oh wow, we're all doing the same thing. How did that come about? Yeah. I think that's pretty neat. And
hop on the same train.
Yeah.
Totally.
But anyway.
All right, guys. So we're gonna keep an eye on all of this, and hopefully in a year or whatever, we can have another discussion and track how everything has been going. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Awesome.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much for coming and talking with us.
All right, no, thanks for talking to me. I really liked it. Thanks.
Speak with you.
Absolutely.